let's get to the other element of, oh my God, like all these tweets over the last day. I can't believe the Padres pulled it off. I can. Like, how many times do we have to watch them do this? And how many times do we have to watch them throw their hands up and say, listen, okay, fine. All you people want to just pass up on this ridiculously talented player? All right, sure. I mean, they've done it, like 10 times over the last 3 seasons. And because they're so good at acquiring, that younger talent and flipping them at sometimes the right time, at sometimes the wrong time. I mean, you've traded away this many prospects. Some of them are going to come back and make you look pretty stupid. I mean, they certainly have their handful of those, and maybe there will be some of those in this too. But in the grand scheme of things, this was a situation where we just talked about it yesterday, that they had so many innings to cover going into this year. They lost. And by the way, trading away Steven Wilson, that's another 50 innings out the door. Nearly half of the innings from last year were gone. And what they had done so far was creative, but didn't actually seem like enough. This, even when you're trading Drew Thorpe, who might have helped this year, looks a lot more like, okay, now we've actually sufficiently backfilled what we've lost in a very real way.
Because Dylan sees posts. That's another thing, right? Pitcher injuries, who knows? It's a crapshoot. It's roulette. But this is a guy who starts games and has stayed healthy as well as a pitcher can. You say this idea that the people are shocked that they can keep getting away with this. They can.
well, they are. Let's not be surprised that AJ Preller keeps doing it. And by the way, I saw a tweet suggesting that Preller saw Cease pitched yesterday. And this was from someone in San Diego. So I could be wrong that this was just total, BS rumor, but I'm just going to run with it anyway because I think it's just a funny scenario and not that implausible. But I love the idea that Preller watched Cease last night and watched Yamamoto get blasted by the Mariners and was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. Why not? Let's not that it's this move is going to push the Dodgers that much. But we talked about it yesterday, there's still too many good players on this team to punt on this season. And while you could say, well, then why did they trade Juan Soto? Clearly, they were operating under a situation where either they were going to hold Juan Soto and do absolutely nothing because that was the financial situation they were working under, or they were like a few other teams, like Seattle, like some other teams we've seen this winter. It's all right, listen, here's the budget you're working with. Do whatever you want, but that's what you're working with. And I want to also mention, the $160 million number you referenced yesterday on Fangraphs, that is, I guess, exact salaries for this year. The luxury tax payroll is much closer to the luxury tax line because their AAVs for all of their ridiculous extensions is so much higher than what these guys are actually making this year. So they didn't have as much, or 160 is not as much, 167 is maybe what the players are making this year. It's much closer to the line. And I think that's an important number to consider when you think about how much flexibility they actually had in making this move. I think now it puts their luxury payroll up to 224, right? 225. Again, this is, via Fangraphs roster resource, which is incredible, and we could not do our jobs without it. But yeah, so I would just say that is something to consider too. Clearly the Padres had a little bit of room to work with, and they decided that trading Soto was going to be the only way to have a competitive team this year and have enough pitchers. And I think you kind of see that. I wouldn't want to trade Juan Soto, and I'm sure AJ Preller didn't want to because he's the guy that trades for Juan Soto, right? You could imagine that kind of person, that kind of GM doesn't want to trade him away. But that's the situation that they work with, and I think it's pretty exciting that they're going for it again.
We'll get back to Preller in a second. Let's just talk about Cease. So what type of pitcher is this? I think I've seen this a bunch online so far in the last 12 hours. The idea that he's a right-handed Snell. Yeah.
I mean, he is.
Pretty much. He's similarly frustrating in that he works deep counts and throws a lot of pitches and doesn't work excessively deep into games as much as some other more pitch to contact oriented starters. He's a 2-pitch guy. I mean, he has a curveball, but it's mostly fastball slider. The slider is the pitch, right? And as is the case often with guys who have awesome sliders, the best version of that includes a lot of sliders outside the strike zone, which often leads to takes, which leads to deep counts, which leads to high pitch counts, right? And so that is kind of the Snell comparison, even though Snell has, 4 pitches. You look confused.
No, you're totally right. And that's where the kind of the comparison I think falls off a bit is that, I mean, the reason Cease can get away with essentially 2 pitches, and it's not as much as what we've seen from Strider, but I mean, the slider is one of the best pitches in baseball, right? So, I mean, all of Snell's stuff is really good. But Cease's slider is, I mean, by run value, I think it was the best pitch in baseball last year, even amongst a disappointing season, right? He is absurdly talented. and when you compare that with the bulk and making third starts, that's something that Snell hasn't had, right? And he's I would say that the question now is, we saw Snell kind of, it's weird because it's like, okay, he had his best season and he maximized in San Diego, but he also was still walking everybody. So how Cease changes under pitching coach Ruben Niebla, I'm super fascinated by. But Cease the personality, Cease the pitcher, I'm just a huge fan. I'm buying in. Like, that's why I really like this for San Diego. I just think, again, not to mention that they clearly needed it. Like, they needed it as much as almost anybody here. The upside is absolutely still present, and it's 2 years, right? They have 2 years with him too, which is also an exciting opportunity, because I'm sure they were kicking around deals for Burns, and Bieber and some of the other 1 year guys, but having him with 2 also makes this a little bit easier to swallow.
Yeah. Last 3 years for Cease, he was solid in 2021, amazing in 2022, where he kind of outpitched his peripherals. I mean, he had a 2.2 ERA and led the league in walks. If we want to talk about Snell-esque. Okay.
Thing,
and then it's the same thing. Finished second in the Cy Young. And then last year was kind of the opposite. Like, he was almost unlucky. Like, he had a 3.72 FIP and his ERA was 4.58.
Yes.
And his walks were still, just as high, if not higher, on a rate basis. So
yeah, the walks and all that stuff is, I just want to say, what is also different? The defense. I mean, the White Sox defense was about as bad as it could be last year, and the Padres, while they have some weird stuff going on, it should still be an upgrade. Even if Jackson, I guess if Jackson Merrill is a complete catastrophe in center, that's something. But no, this defense is way better.
Way better.
Yeah. I mean, Ha-Sung Kim is a Gold Glover, and Manny Machado is still very, very good, and Tatis is a banger in right field. Like, that already is better than what the White Sox were able
hopefully
to provide.
Bogarts can play second. I assume
hopefully Bogarts can play second.
But we'll see.
We'll see. So C specifically, I like it. I think he provides dependability with a whole lot of upside. I think he's better than he was last year. I don't think he's as good as he was in 2022. But if you start Dylan Cease in game 2 of a postseason series, like, you feel good about that, right? I'm totally fine with that.
Yep.
I don't think he's in the top tier of starters, but you could easily see a scenario where he is better than Blake Snell in 2024. And he has the one thing Snell does not have right now, and that is a baseball team. Let's quickly talk about AJ Preller and how he fits into this.
Yeah. I mean, I've had this conversation 100 times now about him because he's made so many deals. But at this point, when you have, again, clearly he was in lockstep with Peter Seidler. And when Seidler passed away, we no matter whatever the new ownership was going to kind of be communicating, and not that I don't believe that they don't kind of believe in Preller and want to stick with him, at some point there needs to be a little bit more consistency in terms of the major league success. And we had that taste of it in 2022. Is he firmly on the chopping block? Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. No. But I still do think that he has acted with aggression that is not an accident. And he knows that, like, listen, Samuel Zavala, bless his heart, it's cool that we signed him and watched him flourish into this cool prospect. I need the guy that can help. He's acted like the whole time. He's always done this, right? The Soto deal was, it's like, well, then why would you trade Soto? That was clearly just the situation that he was in. And so it's not surprising that he went out of his way to still make sure he shows everybody, we are going for it. Our team is good enough. And we'll see if I'm going to be here to see this out, if the ownership wants to stick with me or go in another direction by the end of the season, depending on how it goes. And he had that right, and ownership let him do it. And I'm respect them for being on the same page enough to go for it like this.
But the circumstances have changed for him. Like, Preller was given an abnormal amount of leash, right? Like,
that's been true for a long time.
For a long time, relatively. Yeah. Like, it was different. He was given more. That is not going to be the case anymore because the ownership situation has shifted.
We assume. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's
he's
my sense.
Yes. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, you can see a scenario. It's much more like possible that the Padres win 73 games and they can Preller. Like, that is much more realistic now than it was like a year ago. Yeah. Right. And so because of that, he's not living for tomorrow. Like, this is it.
Never has been. Yeah.
Never has been. And so Preller is one of the most fascinating characters in baseball for me because he is so clearly elite at an important aspect of being a GM. he can identify talent in the minor league level, and he can convince other teams that his prospects are good, right? Those two things are valuable, and he has shown that to be a repeatable skill. There are some things that AJ Preller is very bad at, in my opinion, and that is like communication and setting like a stable culture in an organization, and player development sometimes, and building depth. Not good at that. However, I think that like in this particular context of this particular trade, it's an example of his skill set working to the team's advantage.
Yeah, and by the way, if Preller is thinking I am going to be here forever, he can also think, well, guess what? I can replace Zavala, Arrieta, and Thorpe in a year. A year from now, there's going to be some prospect that they took in the 8th round, or some hard throwing lefty from Venezuela that's like one of the top prospects of baseball, because that's just what they've done, right? Now again, it's only translated to a very limited amount of major league success so far, and that's why that's the standard we should be holding them to. But that's the other thing he's thinking is, listen, as much as it hurts to trade these guys, we got another wave coming, and they have another wave that we already know about that's still there. So
yeah,
the Padres eternally fascinating.